Well, hello everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of C-PTSD on the Road to Recovery with Pop Woodman. Today I want to talk more about the effects of C-PTSD on people who suffer with it. The effects are physical and mental and emotional. There's a whole lot involved in it. C-PTSD is actually considered a neurological disorder, not a mental disorder, but neurologically within the brain. And one of the things that you find out pretty quickly about C-PTSD is that the effects of it on one's health are cumulative. Over time, more and more things can begin to stack on, if you will, because of the issues surrounding C-PTSD. Today, I wanted to talk about the symptoms, and a lot of these symptoms are, excuse me, they overlap with C-PTSD and PTSD. So if you've been diagnosed with PTSD, you're going to recognize some of the symptoms are very similar in a lot of ways to C-PTSD. So let's look at a list of symptoms that you may experience if you have complex post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder. Symptoms include things like intrusive thoughts, nightmares, flashbacks, avoidance behaviors, memory loss, negative thoughts and beliefs, emotional numbness, hypervigilance, irritability and anger, difficulty concentrating, insomnia, exaggerated startle response, self-destructive behaviors, feelings of guilt and shame, social withdrawal, physical symptoms, and suicidal thoughts. That's quite a list of possible symptoms. Not everybody will have them all. Somebody might. And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm just sharing what I'm learning as I learn more about C-PTSD. And, at one point it said, uh, physical symptoms. There are physical symptoms to this neurological disorder, and it can be just simple pain. Along with all of these other things, you can have depression and anxiety, and it all just kind of mixes together in some cases, if you will. But, I didn't even really understand what C-PTSD was until my health issues brought me to my diagnosis. I had been, and it took me more than a year and a half of seeing doctors, many doctors, for nerve issues and neurological issues and so on. It took me more than a year and a half to come to this diagnosis. I'd been to many, many, many doctor's appointments over that year and a half. And eventually it led me to Mayo Clinic. I had been seeing a neurologist via the internet from California. And she threw up her hands at one point as to why I was having all the symptoms that I was having, losing my mobility and everything else. And she said, my suggestion at this point would be to send you to an academic hospital. And she asked me where I'd like to go. And I knew Mayo Clinic has always had a wonderful reputation for being able to figure out the things that other people just don't seem to be able to figure out for one reason or another. Not to criticize anybody, but if you got issues that nobody else can work out, Mayo is certainly a good place to go. It worked for me. It was at Mayo Clinic that I was diagnosed with C-PTSD and, morbid obesity, which had led to many of my physical issues. And my obesity is actually directly linked to my C-PTSD. It's a common symptom uh, of C-PTSD that people just don't take care of themselves, and it leads to these things. And it's not just a matter of not taking care of oneself. Uh, Obesity, especially morbid obesity, I should say, is considered by doctors today, many doctors, and certainly the folks I talked with at Mayo believe this, that obesity on this scale is a disease. It's incurable and it's relapsing. In other words, if you become morbidly obese, it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a struggle going forward in life. And you may have times when you can get the weight off and do well, and then you relapse and put the weight back on. And many of us who are morbidly obese have experienced that over and over and over again over the years. And when I was speaking with the therapist who was interviewing me and everything, she says that, it's considered a disease now because there's no real cure for it. It's chronic, and you relapse. You'll do well for a while, then you'll relapse back into it, and so on. And they ask all kinds of questions concerning what might have gotten you to this point with your weight and so on. And certainly my body weight and health issues surrounding that are linked to my complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I was first diagnosed as obese when I was 16 years old. I was working for a machine shop in Connecticut. And of course, I had to do my work physical and went to the company doctor for that. And at that point, I think I weighed like 205 pounds. And the doctor looked me over, up and down. He says, "You're obese." And I had never heard that term used on me before. I knew I had been gaining weight since leaving high school and so on. And that's when I was first called obese. And if anybody knows what it's like to have C-PTSD, having something like that added to you at 16 years old is not helpful, especially when it becomes public knowledge that your doctor said this and everything else, and that's what happened to me. That's another story for another day. But really, as I look back over my life, I'm not someone who practiced self-harm or things like that. I didn't cut myself and do things like that, but obesity, especially on the scale I'm dealing with now, scale, no pun intended. I look back on my life and that became my form of self-harm. I didn't care enough about myself. I had such a negative view of myself that I just didn't care. No matter how hard I tried, I would always relapse, fall back into the habits, if you will, that got me to where I was. And of course, I'm 60 years old now, and at 58, I started having a lot of these neurological problems and physical difficulties. And it all really came from the fact that I just didn't love me enough to take care of myself. And this disease of obesity had taken over my life. About 2.5 years ago now that I actually was thinking about my weight issues and how I've struggled all my adult life with it from 16 years old on. I dubbed it my passive suicide. Not that I was intentionally wanting to kill myself. The last thing I wanted to do was die consciously, if you will, but subconsciously if it didn't seem to matter to me. I knew the risks of what I was doing with my body and not taking care of it. I'd been diagnosed with fatty liver disease years ago after being on Voltaren for some time for back pain and whatnot from previous back surgeries, and come to find out that medication caused liver problems, and that's where I acquired fatty liver disease. And of course, it's a curable disease, but you have to lose weight and you have to exercise, and your liver can reverse from that. It's not like uh, cirrhosis of the liver. So, I made attempts, try to get the weight off and everything else, and but just never got there. And as I looked back over my life, and I realized what I was doing to myself was literally killing me one day at a time. It was taking away my joy, taking away my mobility, taking away my health. And it was self-harming behavior. I know that now. And I probably did then, but not on a conscious level. And my self-harming behavior didn't harm just me. It brought harm to my family and others in many other ways. Because if I'm not being fully me and being the best husband, the best father, the best brother, uncle, whatever it may be, because of my health, my health is affecting those around me, and it certainly has affected my wife and children, and even now my grandchildren, because I currently really can't function the way I want to as a grandfather because of my limited mobility. So moving forward, I'll be taking care of that, starting the process of taking care of all those issues surrounding my body weight, because I'll be having bariatric surgery very soon, in the hopes of reversing all this so I can be what I need to be to all those around me and to myself. I wanted to share all that with you because this is how the biggest symptom that is showing up in my life due to C-PTSD. And certainly people don't look at obese people as having some kind of disease or any reason for it other than being lazy and gluttonous, and that's really not the case. And I know some people will probably see this video and start making snide remarks about my weight and all that stuff. Feel free, but do know that if you do that, I will delete those comments. I wouldn't do that to you, and I don't want you to do that to me. So I would ask for respect and understanding. But one thing I want to make sure we understand in today's episode is that recovery from C-PTSD is absolutely possible. And you can reverse a lot of things, you can improve a lot of things, and you can begin to enjoy life to the fullest. People do it all the time, but it's going to take work. It took work to get to where you are. It's going to take work to where you want to go, to get to where you want to go. So that's the reality of it all. And I shared some personal stuff here today, and I do so in hoping that if you hear my story and see the results of C-PTSD in my life and what I'm trying to reverse and what I'm trying to change, it might encourage you to do the same. Because there is hope. Where there is life, there is hope. Remember that old saying? It's true. It's never too late to start again. And remember, the big difference between C-PTSD and PTSD is C-PTSD usually occurs after a one-time event of something very traumatic, and it takes time to get over it. And most people can get over it within a fairly short amount of time. But when you can't, that's when it becomes post-traumatic stress disorder. Complex PTSD is something that begins, in a lot of cases, in infancy, of growing up in a family where there's a lot of violence, there's drug addiction, alcohol addiction, just a lot of dysfunction in the household begins to take its effect on an infant. And of course, most of us, we remain with our families from infancy until at least 18 years old, and sometimes longer. And if it's a dysfunctional family, the abuse and the neglect have a cumulative effect over time. And it literally, and we'll talk more about this too, it literally changes the way your brain functions. And that's why it's a neurological disorder, is your brain does not work like other people's do, because you get stuck in this idea of flight or fight. And sometimes, well, there's three words really you need to think about when it comes to complex PTSD. Is you're stuck in a mode of fight, flight, or freeze. Those are the three things that you will see in yourself. Is you're ready to fight at the drop of a hat, you're ready to flee situations that aren't comfortable, that you can't deal with, or you just freeze in the moment because you can't, in your mind, sort it all out and know what to do. You just freeze in place. And we'll talk more about these things as time goes by, as the episodes come along. But I just really wanted today to talk about some of the physical, the mental, and the emotional symptoms that come with complex PTSD. And that's what this episode has been about. Lord willing, we'll get together again soon for episode 4. But I want to leave you with this. Recovery is possible. It's going to take work. Like I said, I was diagnosed when I was 59 years old. I'm 60 now, and I'm just in the beginning stages of recovering from complex PTSD. So I'm undoing 60 years worth of going through all these things and living the way C-PTSD affects you. But recovery is possible. And I'm going to have an episode sometime soon here where I'll share some resources, who you need to go see to get diagnosed, some of the books that are out there that are very helpful, different YouTube channels and other outlets where you can find some of the help you need to get through complex PTSD. There's hope. Hang on to that. There's always hope. Well, that's what I wanted to share with you in this episode. Lord willing, we'll be back together again next week with the next episode. But in the meantime, know that you're worth it. You are worth the effort. Hang in there. Trust in God. Trust in yourself. And become the person that God always intended for you to be. Take care.